Hey everyone, Matt from Soundrolling.com here with another sound chat, and I'm here with Robert Sharman today, production sound mixer, most recently on Horrible Bosses 2, which is very exciting. Hi Robert, how's it going?
Going well, how are you?
I'm very well too, thanks. So today, oh sorry?
Thanks for having me.
No, you're welcome. It should be it's always really interesting getting to talk to more production sound mixers and just kind of see what their kind of process is, especially in certain. Oh, and I have a loop back. All these technicalities, right? Okay. Again, people that are watching, people can comment at one side of the screen or another. And don't forget to subscribe and find even more chats on this channel page, which is really cool. I'll actually, after this video's become a video, I'll be going through and I'll kind of mark out the general questions as well. So it's a lot easier to find specific things that people are talking about in relation to their fields. So that's another, yeah, kind of new update, which is quite cool. But Robert, let's just get started with how you got into sound.
Well, I'll sort of give you the short story of it. I mean, I always thought that I would be in the movie business ever since I was a child, and I did my very first job as a stand-in / assistant / driver for Pauly Shore on Encino Man, which is known in the UK as California Man. And while sort of on that job, I met someone that did 24-frame video playback, which for folks runs at 25, and if you had to film a video screen with a film camera, you would just run the film at 25 frames a second and everything's fine, and nobody noticed. Whereas in the US, video is 29:9:7 and film is 24, and so you couldn't just kind of adjust the film camera because then it would be ridiculous. So you had to do this big, massive conversion and spend tons and tons of money and drive the camera with the video units and all this sort of very complicated thing. So there was a TV playback on that day, and I met someone that I subsequently ended up for when I realized that in front of the camera wasn't my thing. And then the sound mixer on that movie is Bob Wald, and he and I are still friends to this day. And it just sort of, that group of people just became sort of my group. And I did video for many years, and in Los Angeles, that's the same union as the sound union. And once I discovered how much I disliked doing both video assist and video playback and anything related to that, I sort of transitioned to sound in a very, very difficult way, actually, because it was much harder making a switch than you would imagine. But once I was hired on, realized it was great. I loved going to work every day. I loved the contribution I was making to the actual sort of creative product of the film. And by the time I switched over to being a mixer, I really just enjoyed it. You know, I consider myself sort of a filmmaker, whereas the film is the production sound. I'm not keen to be a director. I'm not keen to be in that sort of creative end of things, but I really enjoy the contribution that I make to the story as a production sound mixer. And that was sort of how I ended up here.
Fantastic. And were you ever, when you were doing kind of the playback and things like that, was that for kind of dailies as well? And were you getting kind of references of what the people in the sound department at the time were producing?
No, I mean, because the only interaction I had with the sound department, whether if I was doing video assist, obviously it was taking a feed from the sound department and playing it back. You know, when the director wanted to see playback. When I was doing video playback for on-screen sort of televisions and things like that, then we'd interact with the sound department to either send them a feed from the source material, or deciding whether or not we were going to play it through the practical television, and they would boom the practical television to have that quote-unquote sound, or whether that was something they would leave it to post. Oftentimes the material didn't have sound anyway, so somebody else had it. So the actors on screen just had to pretend they were hearing it, and it was just put in post. So that was the only interaction we had with the sound department at all, and while I was, but the dailies, in those days, it was film. So dailies happened either at lunch on a big film. You would watch the dailies from the day prior, or it would be somewhere after wrap, and most people didn't go. Well, I mean, the people that went were the department heads that needed to go, but I wouldn't be involved in that necessarily.
Cool. And so when you finally got into doing kind of the sound department thing, did you start as sound utility? Did you start as, how did you kind of get your foothold in, and what was your first kind of jobs or responsibilities?
Well, interestingly enough, I mean, I don't remember what my very first job was, but I do. When I decided to switch over to sound, I was doing the visual effects unit, video playback, and using Final Cut Pro on a movie called The Haunted Mansion. And I met the sound department there, and they needed someone to sort of fill in. This was during my prep for the second unit. So the first unit assist guy says, "Well, why not use Robert? He can be your cable man." And in those days, it was cable man because it was one microphone, one cable, one camera. That was how that movie was done, essentially. I don't even know if the mixer had wireless, to be honest. It was his first film. But he had an amazingly good boom operator, and everything was done with one camera, and the actor spoke up, and that was how it was done. So I thought, great, I'll go in and be the cable man / utility, and they just sort of went, "Oh, yeah, we'll see if we can find someone we know." And I was actually there while they were on the phone, ringing person after person after person after person, trying to find someone who was a sound person. And I was a video person, and they must have got their B list and their C list, and they did everything, and ended up still not hiring me. To come in for a couple of days just to wrangle a sound cable. And I mean, now I can understand that a little bit because there's so much more to do in that position with wireless mics and equipment and IFBs and everything else that needs doing. But in those days, really, that particular job was just wrangling the cable. And so I realized on that day how difficult it would be. I was very fortunate subsequently, when I was done with that film, to be hired by Jeff Patterson, who was an amazingly good boom operator, who then became a big-time sound mixer, still is a big-time sound mixer, on Deadwood. And it was the very first episode of the very first season, and he knew me from my video work on the X-Files movie, and he was doing he recorded sound on the X-Files movie. So he thought, oh, I'll give Robert a break, and he had me there for a week. And at the end of the week, he just sort of said, this is a difficult job. And knowing what I know now, I know exactly the position that he was in, which was he'd given me a break as someone who didn't know very much about wiring actors, about doing second boom, about the equipment, and about the maintenance. I mean, it was a very complicated, difficult, and hot and dusty and muddy and just really difficult. So he had to replace me with someone else. And at the time, it was quite sort of devastating to have that sort of opportunity to suddenly disappear. But subsequently, I was hired on to some second units by who is now a very good friend of mine, Stephen Morrow, who also is a very, very good sound mixer, still working a great deal. He's actually much younger than I am, so I'm sure he'll be working long beyond how long I will be. And he and I got along extremely well, and he was willing to sort of tolerate a bit of my lack of knowledge. I was able to learn very, very quickly. I was reliable and on time, and interacted well with actors and other people and him, and it just really, really worked. And we ended up doing a bunch of films together, and he helped me to move up eventually.
I'm hearing more and more that the sound utility, obviously the position has grown, and this is again trying to get kind of rid of, I guess, the kind of old labels such as third man or all that kind of. I guess, yeah, it's still being treated as kind of a low position, but actually the skill set has become phenomenally, like exponentially more complicated. Is there any? What are the kind of main roles that your sound utility are kind of dealing with?
Well, I mean, ever since I started mixing, I would make sure that the sound utility or second assistant sound was busy all the time. I mean, I sat down when I was a utility person. Whether people like it or not, I don't know. However, I don't like my utility person. I don't mind if they sort of prop themselves on their boom stand or sit on an Apple box for a few minutes and look uncomfortable. In the business is that the sound utility doesn't do very much, and they don't have necessary skills or required skills, let's put it that way. They feel that what they're doing is a great deal more important than what the sound utility does. And I think that they fail to recognize that, especially now with larger ensemble casts, with more cameras, and with HD cameras and more interaction with the camera department, what our mutual needs are. The sound utility has a number of very critical jobs, not just exclusively to be a second boom operator, which is often very critical to get around, is having a second boom operator. But on top of that, there's a great deal more equipment to look after. There's more casts to look after in terms of radio miking if that becomes necessary. With multiple cameras, there's lots of different angles, so that if you're laying carpets down, you have to watch out a wider camera, but still be able to kind of get good sound on your tighter camera. So the sound utility job is really a crucial job that has a tangible end result in the final product. And I think that the more we as mixers employ the sound utility to do second boom, to add and to contribute to the product, then people will start to recognize how important the job is. If you're where everything ends up being on one mic, try and keep them busy doing whatever you can, but don't allow to as a job that isn't important. I always worked very hard when I was doing the job, and I expect the same from the people doing the job for me.
It's a really good thing just to always, I guess, just generally always look busy on set, look interested, I guess, engaged with the kind of collaboration process that's going on, especially when there's things like lighting setups or scene changes and things like that. And it can be very easy sometimes, especially when you've already done the first 8 or 9 hours, to then kind of slack off a little bit. But it's really interesting, just that fact of keeping busy, and I guess that keeps a kind of I guess efficiency and kind of speed in your team as well, because if they're always busy, then it's just kind of they're kind of in the motions in a way to then be ready to take on whatever you kind of delegate next.
Yeah, I mean that's right, and also, you know, if you find yourself not very busy, then you can start thinking about the next scene or the work that's coming up, you know, the next week, ordering consumables, or find out if anything needs to be repaired and send it in. I mean, you know, there's always something to do, and I'm friends with several producers and UPMs, and what they tell me is there is nothing that they hate more than seeing crew and or equipment working. And so their job is to sit there and look at what resources are being used and what resources aren't being used, so that the next a gaffer says, I need these 7 lights, and he can say then, well, the last movie I was on, only 4 were ever used and 3 were on the truck the entire time, so I'll give you 4, and if we need more down the road, then that's what you'll have. And it's his job or her job to know what's being used and what isn't, and this goes for manpower. I know that we all talk about, you know, wide and tights and 2 cameras, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but with the fact storage is so cheap, a lot of times it's just a matter of having that second camera doing something, and those technicians that are assigned to the second camera doing something, so that the producers don't try and eliminate that second camera from the arsenal that they want to use when he wants to use it. So sometimes he or she might sort of throw that second camera in to get a shot that looks viable, but it might never in the product, just so that they can justify having that camera there for the times that they need the camera. So it becomes very important to be flexible in that sense. But the same thing goes for our utility person. It's very important that other departments recognize the value that they have when they have the value. Sure, there are times and days and weeks even that perhaps the necessity for them is small, but for the times that job is required, they are absolutely essential. So you don't want to risk having that person available to you by making them seem expendable.
Yeah, it just seems more and more important. I just want to get a lot more people, again, just drumming home that point that, again, the sound utility is not only a viable entry position in terms of getting onto bigger and better films, but also because the kind of roles and responsibilities of the sound utility have grown. I think you'll find that if you're on a sound utility already, I guess you're already ahead of so many kind of people that are kind of just going out and just trying things in a way, because again of the teamwork and the responsibilities growing. But if we go on to kind of what you're doing, so speaking to different boom operators and things like that, they just want the mixer to sit and listen, and that's kind of what they're obviously there for. So what are you listening for, and how are you kind of delegating from the cart?
Well, I mean, if you ask anyone that's come to work with me, I'm a terrible micromanager, and it's only because I'm just so good at it. It's difficult for me because I've been a boom operator, although I wasn't a boom operator for very long. I've been a utility person. I was very proud of the work that I was doing. I have a very strong work ethic, so it's very, very difficult for me to sit back, and it's something that I've learned and grown over the years to do more and more. But sort of ultimately, I still get in the way sometimes. But yes, ideally, like my boom operator to be on set and to handle everything, and for me personally, I would like for them to allow me to sit there and just talk into their ear, and then just decide on their own what the mood of the set is and what notes that I'm giving that they feel they can implement in a sensible manner. And I know that can be very irritating to boom operators, and I sympathize completely, but it's just sort of a terrible part of my personality that I have trouble letting go. But if boom operators sort of understand me, then I'm not being critical. I just want everything to be as good as it can possibly be, and that sometimes gets a little manic. But the job of the boom operator is to get the mics in the best possible position at any given time, and it's our job as the sound mixer to then sort of finesse that placement with creative choice. I mean, I guess the example being, if there's multiple cameras, or if I've discovered what the coverage is going to be, and I know that we're going to go from a big giant wide into a tight, or there's very few medium shots, and I don't want to have such a big perspective shift from what we're doing from one piece of coverage to another, I might ask the boom operator to loosen up just a little bit, or depending on the kind of mic that they're using, to just maybe get a little wider or get a little tighter, or just kind of make those decisions and finesse the mic placement. Think that that's our job, to know the scene prior, to know the scene next, to know the type of coverage that's going to be used, and to make those creative choices based on sort of how we're going to want the scene to sound as a whole. And a boom operator, unless they're hardlined, are usually not getting a good enough feed to sort of understand that nuance. So it helps for us to be able to say, hey, on this next take, let's feather that line in a little bit, a little bit more. Let's not let it seem to be such a dramatic transition from this line to that line, or this person standing, this person seating. Let's favor being looser on the standing person to have it blend a little bit more, and we kind of make those creative choices. And hopefully the operator understands, what those choices are, and then helps me to implement them.
And it's interesting to kind of understand as well how frequently or infrequently you might be going to a director in terms of those creative choices. I mean, obviously the director's making the creative choices that kind of then put you in a situation where it becomes a plan A, plan B, plan C. Are you only going up if there's kind of something that's really going to do you over, or are you kind of just checking in now and again just to make sure that they're kind of happy with how things are kind of going?
I think a director, especially in this day and age, if sound isn't a very specific focus of the film, it's just an element, just like the costumes, just like the props, just like the lighting, just like the camera operating, just like everything else, we're just a piece. And they have 80 pieces to think of, and we have one piece to think of. And we have to remember that we can't think of our piece as being so important that we need to interrupt the director who's got 80 things to think of to tell him how our piece is going. I think if certainly you're encountering difficulties that require the director's input, either a performance isn't, let's say mumbling. That's something that comes up a lot, and not low dialogue. And an actor's choice to be quiet is an actor's choice. We may think it's a bad choice. However, if that's the choice that person's making, then it's our job to record it. If it becomes unrecordable or unintelligible, then it's important to tell the director, because the director's heard the script dozens of times and has read the script dozens of times, and everyone knows what the words are. So they might not understand that the audience gets one crack at it, and if it's a particularly important story point, then it's our responsibility to inform the director, I think you might be losing this piece of dialogue. Just listen up for it and see if you agree, and then it's their choice. But other than something that's going to essentially result in ADR, I wouldn't say to a director, would you like it to have a little more reverb? Would you like me to favor this person or that person? What camera do you think you might be using in the final edit? Which camera should I be favoring with my choices of microphone? That would be disastrous, I think, if you try to involve the director in those kinds of choices. Experience tells you that. I watch the product that I record. I see what types of shots they use. I see what sort of edits they choose. I see what performance generally get chosen. So I have a pretty good idea when I'm recording a scene what shots typically would be used, what performances typically make sense, and you make your choices based on what your experience tells you. And sometimes you're wrong, obviously, but you kind of use your knowledge and experience and make those choices based on that.
And the other director that's kind of on set that everyone goes to is obviously the first assistant director. And so what's your relationship with them? Because I've always found them obviously just vital in terms of buying you those extra few seconds or getting people to especially shut up.
Right. Well, they are vital, and I think the truth being that these days with schedules becoming shorter, and with days getting longer, people want to go home. But when you have a movie that used to be a 75-day movie and it's now a 55-day movie, and your days are 12, 14 hours, You no longer are their friend. You are a way of keeping them from getting the crew home. So it's sort of it's a delicate relationship. Obviously, really, they make a lot of the choices. You want to use them first in terms of finding out where they are in their day, finding out what their timeline is. If you feel like you need 5 minutes, it might be a good idea to go and say, how's the day looking? Do you feel like, I could have 5 minutes to do it this way because it's really going to improve. You feel like you're really buried, and 9 times out of 10 they're going to say, "Oh, I'm totally buried. I can't possibly give you an extra 5 minutes." But if you let them know that you understand what their issues are, they're much more inclined to give you the time when you need it. What you don't want doing is running to them every 5 minutes, complaining about every noise that may or may not be an issue, slowing them down, giving them trouble. They're just going to not respect you, and it is a very, very, very important relationship because they do run the set. So.
And when you're kind of approaching a kind of scene to do it, is there kind of just a general running order? Like when it's a completely new scene, is there a general running order of you just quickly going through the script and just seeing that whole scene and trying to then get the coverage, and then do you kind of work out a kind of battle plan scene by scene?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've gone over the script ahead of time, and you have a pretty good idea of what's happening. I mean, if you're on a TV show, obviously, you've done a few episodes, you have a pretty good idea of how everything's going to go, and if you're on a set that you've been on many times before, you more or less know where the general, so do the actors. They know, well, if I go to the sink, that's going to be a whole other setup, and then we have to pull the window. So maybe in this rehearsal, I'm not going to go to the sink. And experienced actors sort of know that information. On a movie, when you're dealing with a bigger schedule, and it's more of a creative decision, then they're going to go to the sink and this and that. You can watch a rehearsal, you can get an idea of where things are going. You watch the DP and the director have a conversation, see what they plan out for coverage. And once again, it's an experience thing, and this is where I think there's a lot lacking. Whereas a lot of mixers these days just come in and they say, "Okay, I'm a mixer. I've gone and spent 20 grand, and now I'm a mixer because I know the equipment and I can put a microphone over someone's head and know what's going on." But there's a lot more to it than that. And I think having been a lover and having been a utility person, watching what's happening on set, when I was a stand-in on my first job, that was great because I sort of understood the terminology, bridge, the lens sizes. These are things as boom operators, a lot more difficult now, but they would always throw prime lenses, and you would know what the frame line was. You would know that this is the shot they're going for. You'd know how it would cut into the final product. And these are things that you learn over time. So as a mixer, you watch the rehearsal, and you have a pretty good idea of what the coverage is going to be. Once you get the master recorded, you have a pretty good idea of how the performance is going to develop. And the plan is a fluid plan. And things can change, and you can change your mind about stuff, which drives boom operators crazy that come work with me, because I may think, well, my plan was this, and we all talked about this, but now that this is happening, now that they've chosen this camera placement, and this actor's chosen this performance, what if we do this instead? And I like to do that, and I like to kind of change up the plan. I think it's important in a creative environment to be able to have some flexibility.
And are you always, even if you, for instance, have already gone through a plan, and let's say it's a kind of bigger setup or set of moves, are you always going to kind of stick to your plan first and get kind of one in the can, as they say, and then use a second take or other coverage to then do more experiments to see if your kind of second plan would be any good?
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's going well, and the first plan was a good plan. It really depends on the day, and depends on the mood, and depends on how things have been going. And you might just say, let's just stick with the plan. It's great. If you have a director that does 5 or 6 or 7 takes, and all of a sudden you think, oh, let's see if maybe we can finesse this a little bit and get a little nuance just to kind of keep it interesting, then I'll throw that out to the boom operator, and the boom operator will say, hey, I've got flags I'm judging here, and this backlight's killing me, and can we just stick with the current plan? And I'll say, yeah, the current plan is fine. The current plan's fine. I was just looking for, a little bit of something, but I'm sitting in front of a monitor with a single fader push, and I just think, wow, this is really easy, but I forget that the boom operator's in there doing something that isn't very easy. And so I trust that that conversation can be had. But I just think that my movies recently have been so many cameras and so many actors and so much happening, and short schedules and tight budgets, and I feel as if the opportunity to go for nuance has become less and less frequent, and so really you're just trying to get everything as best as you possibly can, and from time to time you get some wonderful scene that they shoot with one camera, and you can record it with one boom, and the acoustics in the room are lovely, and the performance is great, and you're actually really sort of enjoying the elements that all come together. But in general, we're just out there just trying to get it. I mean, we're just up against so many obstacles, time being one, multiple cameras being the other, and you just have to get it. And if it's working, then as they say, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it.
Yeah, exactly. Just make sure you can get the meat and potatoes and all those other methods.
You gotta get it. Sometimes you get pretty tired at times, and it's 4 in the morning, and you just have to get it. And that's what the job is. And creativity plays a big part, but really you just got to get it.
Yeah. And so what's in your kind of arsenal of gear that you're using at the moment?
I record, I would say 90% of everything I do on an MKH50. I do use wireless boom. I find that mic placement trumps cabling up. I think with all the operators that I've spoken to, especially if you're using 2 booms, if you're cabled into a room and an extra light goes up or changes a little bit or the camera moves a little bit, and all of a sudden you think, oh, I'd be much better off if I were over there, but the second boom's cabled in over there, and I'm cabled in over here, and if I needed to go over there, I'd have to drag the cable all the way around, and if I didn't drag it around, I'd run it over the head feeder, and then I'd get interference on the cable, and there's this whole thing, and you end up just deciding to stay where you are and perhaps sacrificing that mic placement. And I think that the mic placement, be it lavaliers, be it boom mics, is absolutely the critical part of this job. I mean, I can be the best mixer in the world. If the mic's in the wrong place, it's not going to sound good. And you can be a terrible sound mixer, but if you're hitting the button and getting the levels right, and your boom operator's got the microphone in the right place, then typically, unless it makes some flare, the movie is going to sound good. So I think mic placement trumps just about everything, be it equipment, be it wireless, be it cable, be it anything. Getting the mic in the right place is absolutely the number one thing. And I think 50s are great. That's my own personal choice. I use them inside. I use them outside. And that's my mic of choice. The EP006 lavalier is my lav of choice. Although I don't have as many of them as I'd like, so I'm still using my COS 11s. For a lot of the heavy lifting, but I don't radio mic everyone all the time. That has changed on some films. The last Horrible Bosses 2, which you mentioned, had everyone radio mic'd all the time because we had 3 cameras on just about overlapping, we had ad-libbing, we had lots of characters, and it just was impractical to rely on getting everything. I do have shotguns and 416s and other things to use, which I do use from time to time. But typically the 50 does it all. Goes into a PSC Solis board, which I think is great. Love it. Form factor is terrific. Sounds good. The routing options are good. Love the board. It's terrific. And then that goes to the 788T and Electrosonics transmitters and venue receivers and the wireless. And
you're using the Electrosonics, is it the HH for the kind of wireless plug for your boom?
It's an HM. It's the one. I still have a UH400A and I have an HM. In the UK, I've noticed that it's a lot more common to plug the plug-in transmitter at the end of the pole, only because the external cable was the wiring of choice. And so once that cable is gone, there's no cable inside the pole. So the sort of typical choice is now the plug-in transmitter at the microphone end of the pole. I think boom operators in the US whine about that a bit because of the extra weight, whereas it seems as if shedding cable in lieu of the transmitter is something that boom operators here like, so you don't find a lot of people complaining about the extra weight at the end of the pole. But I think that's just a matter of choice. Typically, in the US anyway, we had internally coiled cable boom poles. I've run a small jumper cable to a phantom power supply and the UM400 transmitter. I just feel like the exposed antenna on the UM400 just provides for better range. I find them less susceptible to RF interference in terms of all the nonsense that's happening around camera now with the Teradeks and the wireless focus and everything else that the idea of having a transmitter sort of right by the camera has proven to be an issue. I mean, range helps because you've got the transmitter up in the air, and so that solves a lot of problems, but then it sort of introduces new problems. So I don't have range issues typically, so I just like the idea of the belt packs.
Yeah, fantastic. And I suppose it's just like a little backpack that they can put on as well.
What's that?
If they want. If you wanted to run... Sorry,
no,
just...
Yeah, just a clip-on. I don't typically put a... I mean, I've seen some guys that wear the, the sound devices preamp. I've seen that rig before. So M1 and then UM400, which is very chunky. So wearing it on the belt isn't optimal. So I've seen it before where they've got some sort of a check pack with various different bits in. And I know that other mixers like to have a lot of their boom operators so that they can communicate back and forth without having to collapse the pole and various other sort of nice little tricks. But I don't know. I just think that sometimes the easiest option is the better option in fast-paced movies. I mean, obviously every movie is different, every TV show is different, every genre is different. I have found in the movies that I do that typically are compressed schedules, lots of cameras. I just like my guys to be able to and guys, I mean guys in the generic guys, because I've hired many women as well as men. So I'm just using guys as the generic term. I like my guys to just have the flexibility of being able to move around, staying in contact, and not have bits. My experience has been the more bits they have, the more likely they are to put the bits down, and then it just sort of, and then it just kind of slows up.
Yeah, it's good to, just I guess the less they can have on them, the kind of easier everything's going to be. For the kind of talkback system, are they kind of wearing a headset with a microphone for you?
No, I mean, and once again, if you're cabled up and you have a two-way system, with headphones and a microphone, I suppose that's sort of an interesting thing to do. I think a lot of people will clip a separate wireless onto their boom operators so they can open up that communication. I just find that I can pick my boom operator's voice out very, very easily. I mean, I really can't. Even within a day of working with somebody, I can separate that very, very easily. So I don't need my boom operator to collapse a pole, and I don't need them to shout up to the microphone either. I think, if they just sort of point their head up and say what they need, then I can hear it. So for my purposes, I just don't want all that extra gear out there. I know it works for a lot of people, and it's a great option, and I don't mean to imply that I wouldn't do it in the future on certain, but I just find for my purposes, it's just one extra fader to have to push up. It's one extra thing to do, and I always joke, that I have very limited brain power and need to concentrate on recording good quality tracks. So the more distractions that I have, the more likely I am to make a mistake that actually matters to the final product. So the more streamlined my workflow is, the more likely I am to concentrate on getting better sound, which is what we're there for.
Well, it seems like streamline is definitely the main word when there's kind of 3 cameras and so many talent talking and things like that. Are you, for instance, when you're kind of setting out your who's going to be on what fader, what's your kind of process for doing that? Are you just going with numbers of the call sheet? Are you just starting with, well, this person's talking first, so I'm going to put them on one? Or
yeah, I really preference. On Horrible Bosses 2, the characters were Nick, Kurt, Dale. That's what they always were referred to as, Nick, Kurt, Dale. So they were on, 2, 3, 4. So my boom was on 1, and Nick, Kurt, Dale 2, 3, 4, and that's what they were always on fader-wise. They were in just about every scene. We almost always had all 3 of those faders in play. So that's where they went. I also, for walk and talks and car scenes, this one, this fader, this one, this fader. And I get very confused to the point that I'll change frequencies if they get wired on the, my boom operator might wire the wrong person and wire them backwards, and I have to swap the cables because I absolutely get driven mad if it's sort of if it's backwards. But I don't have any preference otherwise in terms of who talks when. It's just I think I don't know, when you deal with large casts and everyone's very busy, it's just get them on the actors and we'll figure it out. I'm smart enough that if the first person talking is on fader 4, then that's what I'll push up. I mean, I don't know. Everyone's different.
No, of course. It's just really interesting just seeing people's kind of process towards it. And with just mixing itself, obviously you are recording ISOs as well of everything.
Yes.
But for your actual mix track, there's always a kind of what I guess a common question is like mixing the boom and the lavs in a kind of mix track. And I've heard some like percentages bantered around in terms of, well, you can bring lavs up 25%. It's like 25% to 75% in terms of mixing. Are you ever finding? Are you just mixing for you? Are you just trying to always mix the boom? Are you?
Well, I mean, from all the post-production people I've spoken to, and I think it's really, really critical that production sound mixers talk to dialogue editors and re-recording mixers to understand what they do with the tracks. And on a movie like Horrible Bosses, for example, they are going to remix every scene. They have money, they have the budget, they have the time. My boom operator is a very good friend of mine on the last movie that we did together, and I've sort of been protective of mics in the past looked at me and said, if you were a re-recording mixer, wouldn't you take every single track and every single scene and try to mix it better than the production sound mixer did? And you know what? I absolutely would. I mean, there's just no question I would. And they have the benefit of knowing what take was chosen. They have the benefit of knowing what camera was used. You know, they have the benefit of everything that you would to know as a production sound mixer. They have that information. They've got the picture edit, so they know. So the likelihood of your production mix in a big budget, for example, a big budget movie where you're using multiple microphones, the likelihood of your mix actually slim to none. So we can talk about all the finesse and nuances that we can do, but really doing it for the temp, doing it for dailies, you're doing it for the director listening on the headphones, you're doing it for you, you're doing it because it's what we do. We're mixers, and we want to do that. So percentages just don't play into it. I mean, you just sit there and you just kind of do it and have it sound nice. And I would say that almost every re-recording mixer will tell you we never combine two microphones for one line of dialogue. We will pick which microphone we pick, and then we will add effects or add EQ or do whatever it is that we do to make it sound the way that we want it to sound. A very high percentage of re-recording mixers will tell you that they will never have two microphones open on one piece of dialogue. So the fact that we do that on set is more of a way of making our mix kind of sound the way that they will make it sound with plugins and EQ. We're doing it with live microphones to have it sound the way that we want it to sound. And on a low budget or television project where the mix is likely going to be used, you can't afford to make sort of rash choices. You need to kind of be you're doing, and once again, experience just tells you don't do that, and you really want to do that, and then on take 3, because you've been listening, knowing that if I just did a little bit more, I know it could sound really cool, and then you God, that was a disaster, and then they say cut, moving on, and you just go, oh, now they got to remix it, you know, and you feel bad, but I don't know, you have to do your best. You have to do what you want to do. You have to make your mix sound like it should sound. You've got to do all of these things. And the reality is, it is very quick for them to fix your mistakes. Just write a little note on your sound report that says, bad mix, sorry. They'll forgive you. Just don't do it a lot.
Yeah, I guess that's the key. Otherwise, you're not really mixing at all. You just become the kind of ISO junkie. It's interesting with sound reports as well, just because with them all kind of being electronic and things. Are you using? Because I know the Sound Devices, for instance, has like a preset list of things you can kind of add to metadata. Are you having presets, or what kind of things are you putting in apart from the occasional bad mix?
Yeah, well, becoming rare in the sense that I don't. I'm a rare person in the fact that I don't really do anything like that. I name I name because it's sound devices. I put the scene number in, so that goes into the metadata for scene number. But I don't label the tracks. I find that once again it's a distraction. If you're putting somebody on a particular track and all of a sudden you need to change something, you change and I don't know. It just seems like there's so much extra to have to do on set. And again, we work in a very fluid environment, and we limited time, and it's 4 in the morning, and it's pouring with rain, and it's freezing cold, and whatever the circumstances are, I don't feel like it's my job to be laying everything out in a sort of secretarial aspect of things. I'm recording, and I write it down, and I write down what I did, and there is someone in post whose job it is to sort out the tracks and to label them if they want them labeled, and to put them in bins, and to do the various things that they do, so that even if doing all of that extra work, who's to say that they're not just going to redo it anyway? And that's what their job is. My job is recording the sound, and the editor's job, or the assistant dialogue editor's job, is to sort out the tracks. So I use a paper report because I have discovered through research that most of the time, if you're doing an electronic report, it gets printed up anyway and then photocopied anyway. My reports are smaller, they're a little more compact, and I've discovered that they actually use less paper with my paper reports than if I were to generate electronic reports that have takes on one big sheet of paper. The road, everything's electronic, and I have used Movie Slate. Happy to. I have absolutely no issue with using Movie Slate or any, provided that it stays electronic down the road. But in terms of notes, and I know, sorry, that was the original question. I got a bit long-winded. I don't put down notes that are unnecessary. I think a messy sound report is something that appreciated. So I won't put plain. I won't put honked horn. I won't put noisy air conditioner. I may put noisy air conditioner we can't turn off, so that they know that I recognize this was a bad sound and I was unable to. But I will put notes as to where they can find a piece of dialogue that I know was damaged due to some unforeseen circumstance. I might go back and listen to previous tracks and say, hey, there's a great bit of room tone on take 3, or these 2 words that got damaged by that honk horn on take 5, takes 2 and 3, they're perfect, and the performance was similar, and the timing was similar, so you can, so that's something I will do in my spare time, because I think that really, really does help. So they don't and words. But in terms of note keeping, I don't know. I don't think it's my job. If I'm required to do it, I will gladly do it. I'll do whatever I'm asked to do. But in terms of what I volunteer to do, I'll put the scene number in.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a really good process, and especially if you're going back and finding those room tones, and especially, I guess, wild lines occasionally when they come up as well. Could you just talk through how often you're kind of doing room tone? Is it kind of once for a scene, or are you kind of just while you're recording saying, okay, I've kind of got 3 seconds there, I'm kind of happy to leave the scene?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me for room tone is knowing what the scene is. I mean, if the noise or the sound of the room is lower than what the noise will be in the story and in the movie, if it's a New York scene or an office scene or whatever kind of scene is, if there's any sort of background noise that's happening that's going to be well below any kind of effects that they're going to be putting in after, and it's just standard room noise, then I think you don't need it. Sure, they might like to have it, but you also have to think again about how long each day is, and how long the schedule is, and how much it costs you to get 30 seconds, which you don't need 30 seconds, but you have to get 30 seconds to hope that there's 5 seconds where nobody's talking or making a noise. The amount of time that takes costs a certain amount of money and a certain amount of your reputation every time that you demand that. So if there's an unusual room tone, or a tone that I know will change for a different piece of coverage, or a new noise that wasn't there previously, something that's going to affect the edit, then I will absolutely make every effort to get it. And if I don't get a separate piece of room tone, I will look for it for them and tell the script supervisor and say take 4 has 7 seconds at 2.5 minutes in, that you'll be able to find your room tone. And I do think that if I have the time, I really like to give those things to post. I think that they're very, very, very appreciated and very easy for us to do when we have a minute. And I like listening back to tracks anyway. I think a lot of times I'll beat myself up over a mix, and then I'll listen back and think, well, that's fine. I was far too hard on myself.
Oh. And the what was it? It was coming back to
off-screen dialogue and wild lines.
Yes. Sorry, that was it.
Yeah. I think wild lines are very important. A lot of actors don't quite understand what they are, and a lot of directors don't understand what they are, and a lot of the whole filmmaking thing where everyone knows what everyone else's jobs are, that's sort of gone to the past. So a lot of times people don't understand that wild lines are a recreated performance of a select take that you hope to get sort of immediately afterwards, so that they're fresh in the minds of the actors in the same space with the same microphone, the same acoustic qualities, so that if there's an issue with a piece of dialogue, that the dialogue editor will have a crack at laying it in lieu of asking an actor to ADR something months later when the mood has changed, their character can be somebody completely different, they're in a booth, they don't have the benefit of the other actors or the space or any of the things that helped tell the story are now gone, and they're wearing headphones, and it's just a whole different experience. But a wild line, they can perhaps recreate something. So maybe there was a fan effect, or maybe there was something happening that prevented you from getting that bit of dialogue. It's great to try and get it. So either pick it up later off camera if the performance hasn't changed, and if the acoustics haven't changed much. That's another way to get it done. But I don't like the sound department to be in the way. So I feel like if I have something, and if I have the dialogue, and we've already recorded it, and we've already shot that side, I won't necessarily continue to get off-camera dialogue unless, again, it's an ad-lib situation where they might actually come up with a line that they'll use that's not on camera, a funny joke that then leads into an on-camera line that was funny. So it's important to get it in that respect, but not at the expense of again, the department's reputation. It's important to know what you need and to not get in the way to get something that you don't need. Yeah,
it's like having the it becomes inefficient because it's such a small amount of actual quality, I guess. It's kind of coming from the original thing. A lot
of times the actors won't recreate the performance. They'll create the performance enough for their colleagues to act back to. And there are some actors that their off-camera stuff, they will cry and they will do everything off camera that they do on camera, and that's great. But most actors, especially if you've already shot their coverage, will not deliver the same type of performance. For multiple reasons, really savvy actors know that if their off-camera performance is different or less good, that the editor will clearly not use them off camera and will use the on-camera dialogue. Happens in television probably more than film, but being on camera is what the actors are there for. So a lot of actors will hold back for their close-up, or they'll hold back for their particular piece of coverage that they want the editor to use, and will deliver the correct performance when it's the coverage that actor wants them to use. And they'll flub lines or do this and that off camera to prevent from that being used.
Yeah, I've heard some really incredibly kind of shocking stories from some actors where they've literally gone and got a C-stand and then just put a tennis ball, and the person hasn't even bothered to read in the other lines from the other side of the dialogue, which I just think is pretty disrespectful to the actors as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on sets where they've sent lead actors home for one reason or another. I mean, on one movie, and I won't say what movie it is, they sent the actors home because they just wanted them to have short days, and they were just being nice. And they would leave the day players to perform the other side while those actors were gone. And on that particular movie, it was just one of those things where I'll use the word, it wasn't critical that they be there. I mean, yes, it would have been nicer. Yes, it would be more professional, those things. But sometimes there's schedule requirements. Sometimes there are reasons why that the actors won't be there. But I don't believe I've been on a set. I can't think. I've probably seen it a couple of times where I can go now, right? And off they went, and their stand-in or someone else would read their lines off camera to the other actor. But typically with day players, not with critical scenes, not with major performances where that would be an issue. I think it's kind of rude, but we all have a job to do. If the job gets done and they can go home early and get with their kids and have some life and be with their family and whatever it is, I mean, I can't fault an actor for wanting to go home and spend some time with their family. And if that means that they can leave a few hours early, I just can't fault them for that.
No, I say all the more power to them. I feel right.
I mean, obviously, I don't know. It's difficult for the other actor in the scene, and they usually ask, and they usually say, "Is it okay? I mean, do you need me for this?" And there's always that conversation, but and once again, that's what makes it so important for us to get the words on camera, because when you think that you're going to get a chance to get something off camera, then the performance changes or the actor goes home.
Yeah. I just kind of want to kind of finish off with a really interesting point, just in terms of working, just kind of picking up on the family aspects of things, because once you do have a family, obviously things completely change. I'm aware that obviously some of the people watching won't have had their own family yet, for instance, and kind of starting out, and kind of just wonder how it kind of changes your kind of work approach or work ethic, especially when again, all the hours are still getting longer, all the work is still getting quote unquote kind of harder in a way to kind of get things done to a high standard.
It's difficult. I mean, I moved to the UK recently, and I haven't been tremendously busy. And if work came up that wasn't necessarily good for me, family-wise, I might have to take the job anyway. And I think that's a choice that all of us have to make at one point or another. I mean, at the beginning of my career, you take any job that comes and you just say yes, and you never say no, and everything turns into something. There's no such thing as one day of work in this business. I mean, you get called for one day and you develop long relationships. I mean, I mentioned my friend Steve Morrow previously. I was called for one day on a second unit as a utility sound person, and it was a random phone call. He didn't know me. He got my name from somebody else. And if I was going to the beach that day and decided to not work that day, my entire career would be different. I mean, my relationship with Steve and my friendship with Steve has created the career that I have now. I mean, he helped me to move up. Some of the credits that we did together still look good on IMDb. His method and his equipment choices I always found to be very good. I worked for a lot of other mixers over a number of years, and I learned what to do and what not to do. Whereas I just found Steve's method to be both his on-set manner and his equipment choices and his mixing ability to be something that I aspire to. So that you've got to just take the jobs as they come. You just can't make those decisions. When you establish yourself and you get a bit older and you have children, you have that there is life outside of this business, and it's important to kind of hold on to those things. It's important to understand that it's a job like any other job, and it's a great job, and there are people lined up to do it free. So, I mean, any movie that I'm on where I'm getting paid what I'm getting paid, there's probably 100 people who might not be as capable as I am, but there are probably 100 people lined up saying, I will come and do that job for free if you have me come and do that job. So we have a job that people are willing to do for nothing. So we have to realize how privileged we are. But at the same time, life is what life is, and you have to be able to separate it. You have to be able to make choices that are good for your family, good for your relationship, good for your kids. And if it means turning a job down, or if that means, I don't know. I just think that when you've gotten to a point in your career and you get to make those choices, I think you should. I think you should make choices that matter to your family.
Well, I think that's a fantastic way to kind of, just wrap up this kind of talk for today, really. Again, because it's just, we get so caught up in just the work and every day could be my last day and all this kind of stuff, and then look back and realize, well, I could have done it. There's always, I guess, going to be that reflection and that question, why? But I guess as long as you're kind of setting out to do the best you can and the right thing for you and everyone you love, then I guess you can't go far wrong, can you? So it's fantastic. So I will say goodbye to our viewers, and I will just leave you to say the final goodbye, Robert.
Great. Well, goodbye. If anyone was listening live, hope you have a very happy holidays. And for anyone that's watching this playing back, thanks for watching all the way through.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, I will be writing this up so we have kind of the questions set out, and you're more than welcome to kind of skip back and forth and find the answers as quickly as possible, which is very good. So thank you again, Robert, just for all your information. And it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from you.
Bye.